The ICF Core Competency, co-creating the relationship, and specifically point number 3, establishes and maintains agreements. Let's understand this competency. Let's help you feel equipped to meet the criteria of this competency, to take your natural coaching skills to master coaching levels and beyond. Now, if you've been following the other videos, you've seen that we've slowly been shifting from competencies that are implied, that are part of your mindset as a coach, the ethical practice of coaching, and therefore aren't items that you can demonstrate in a coaching session necessarily. And we're leaning more and more heavily into what you really need to prove you can do. So providing clear evidence and sufficient evidence in your coaching to be awarded, for example, an ICF credential. But even if you're not planning to get ICF credentialing, these milestones are still helpful because they're going to inspire you to grow and develop in the practice of professional coaching. So let's unpack this. Partners with the client and relevant stakeholders to create clear agreements about the coaching relationship, the process, plans and goals. Establishes agreements for the overall coaching engagement. That's whether it's one session or a year's worth of coaching, as well as those for each coaching session. So of course, these first few are implied. Explains what coaching is and is not, and describes the process to the client and relevant stakeholders. That's often going to happen prior to your coaching session, especially if you're submitting an observed coaching session. Reaches agreement about what is and is not appropriate in the relationship, what is and is not being offered, and the responsibilities of the client and the relevant stakeholders. This is about clarity, decency, professionalism, all those good things. Reaches agreement about the guidelines and specific parameters of the coaching relationship, such as logistics, fees, scheduling, duration, termination, confidentiality, and inclusion of others. So, of course, these are all part of ethics. They're part of being a professional. Partners with the client and relevant stakeholders to establish an overall coaching plan and goals. Partners with the client to determine client-coach compatibility. Not all clients are for us, and we are not the right coach for all clients. This is why a lot of coaches will offer some kind of free or introductory session so that everybody can test the waters. And now the next few points are really the ones that you want to show evidence for in your coaching, that are going to be looked for if someone was assessing your coaching skills and competencies. Partners with the client to identify or reconfirm what they want to accomplish in the session. Emphasis on identify and reconfirm. It's very helpful to do both. What the client wants to accomplish in the session is what we call a contract. And I'm going to go through some of the skills and methods that supports this competency as well as strengthens the other competencies in a moment. Partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address. And the emphasis is on them, not what we think they need to address, yes? Or resolve, and I've emphasized the word address and resolve, to achieve what they want to accomplish in the session. I like to refer to this as having some kind of conversation around inner obstacles. What are the barriers that we want to put on the table? What's the elephant in the room that needs to be included to make the coaching session successful and rewarding and valuable? Partners with the client to define or reconfirm measures of success. It's like when Donkey asks Shrek in the Shrek movies, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? That's a measure of success. It's how you and your client know where you are, how you're tracking towards some kind of destination or progress in a coaching session. For what the client wants to accomplish in the whole coaching engagement, the whole journey, whether it's 6 months of coaching, 12 months of coaching, and also in the individual session of 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes or more. Partners with the client to manage time and focus of the session. I mean, that's as simple as even mentioning something like, we have 45 minutes and we have 5 minutes left, so that there's a partnership that includes an awareness of what we're focusing on, how much time is left to make the session super constructive. Continuous coaching in the direction of the client's desired outcome unless the client indicates otherwise. So it's no good the client comes up with what they want from the session, then us as coaches decide, no, we want to go somewhere else. It's like pointing to the map and the client says, here's where I want to go, and we take a client on another road. Partnering means we keep checking whether we're going in the direction that the client is happy with. And if we get a sense that something has changed, I always say to my students, if all else fails, just ask your client. Say to them, am I picking up that the direction is changing? Do you want to change focus here? Shall we switch from talking about what we said in the beginning to this new item that's on the table now? If all else fails, just ask your client and you'll stay on track. And finally, this last one is implied. Partners with the client to end the coaching relationship in a way that honors the experience. So that's not likely going to happen in an observed coaching session or in a performance evaluation recorded session, right? So here are the skills and methods that are really going to support this particular competency and are going to support all the rest. The first is what we call contracting. Now, contracting has got nothing to do with attorneys. There's no attorney waiting in a cupboard ready to jump out during your coaching session. It's got nothing to do with anything necessarily signed. Although contracts may or may not be involved with the kind of coaching services you offer, depending on who you're coaching and the degree of detail and complexity and what you and your client really choose to do. In this context, the word contracting is jargon. The contract of a session is the agreed outcome or activity. It's the answer to the question, what do we want to do in the time frame of this coaching session? So if we've got 30 minutes to coach, what do we want to do in that 30-minute segment? If we've got 60 minutes, what do we want to do? I can usually tell whether a coach is professional or just beginning by their contracting skills. The InnerLifeSkills methodology teaches a 3-step framework, like a scaffolding, where the first entire step is contracting. The second emphasizes solutions, and the third final step emphasizes closing off a session with next actions, etc. Now, there's a lot more to each step, but it's just a simple framework to remind us of what the priority is at each stage of the coaching journey. But also it's important to have flexibility here, because we want to be responding to the opportunities that arise in a coaching session spontaneously and intuitively, and we don't want to make coaching mechanical and dry and surface. But still, contracting is super important. So contracting is finding out what your client wants to achieve in the session. Now, we don't ask that in the first millisecond of a coaching session. Sometimes a client does arrive knowing what they want, and that's usually because they've received a lot of coaching already, they understand the process. But most of the time, the client is going to discover that through a bit of conversation that you have in the beginning of a session, which could be 5 minutes or 10 minutes or more. Once you establish a contract, which could be anything from an action plan to a list of solutions to a mind map to a mindset, your client might decide they want to leave the session motivated. They want to overcome an inner obstacle like procrastination. They want clarity. They want direction. There are all kinds of contracts that are possible. You want to make sure you know what a contract is, can excavate it, and can hear it when it shows up. In case you think you still haven't found a contract, meantime the client has said it 3 times. Then we backtrack and confirm the contract. Backtracking is that we use the client's words. We don't substitute their words for our words. We don't make assumptions. And we also confirm it. We double check. So if today you leave this coaching session with the following. Is that what you want? It's like a waiter taking an order at a restaurant, a really professional waiter and one that doesn't want to have food sent back often, double checks, is that what you want? Reframing means that if the person states what they don't want instead of what they do want, that we have a number of reframing skills and questions that we can rely on to shift our client's attention away from what they don't want to find out what they do want. It's no good being in a restaurant and saying, I don't want vegetables. Your waiter's standing there going, okay, but what's the order? So reframing is about reframing what we don't want to what we do, from a lack of clarity to being more specific and clear, from something that's powerless, not in somebody's power, to something that is, and something that's multiple to something singular. So if your client says, oh, I'd like to do this and this and this and this and this, we would say something like, well, which is your priority, so that we know which to focus on. Having evidence procedure skills, or asking the kinds of questions that unpacks the detail of the contract, instead of making an assumption that we know what someone means when they say the word motivated or clarity or even action plan. One client might want 3 bullet points for an action plan. Another client may want an entire mind map that includes some mindset changes. We also want to deepen the value of the goal. We want to find out why it matters to them. This long-term aspiration, we may even want to unpack what that goal or that dream or that aspiration feels like, looks like, its impact in the person's life, etc. You can see there's a lot to contracting. And the final point that really puts the cherry on top for this competency and sets up an entire session really beautifully is asking our client what's in the way of them achieving what they want in the session. What could be in the way? What do they want to, in the language of the ICF, address or resolve in order to achieve what they want to accomplish in the session? So if you take these skills on board, if you go and acquire them, of course, if you don't know how to do this, find a really good trainer or mentor. All of these are included in InnerLifeSkills Coach 101 and Global Coach. And that completes your foundation core competencies. Let's look at the next competency.